Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Erin, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
Welcome. So happy to have you here with us on Successful But Struggling. Today we have a very special guest, actually one of our own. Joanne is in the showroom here with me, and today we'll be talking about stress. Here's the thing. Stress, the way that I see it at least, comes to us in so many different angles and from so many different facets that when it comes to dealing with stress, what we're seeing is that there are 1,001 different solutions out there. I'm kind of put solutions in quotations on how to deal with stress. But Joanne has a very unique perspective. And the reason her perspective is very unique is not only is she a physician, she's a psychiatrist, but she's also a coach. She actually works with a lot of physicians, guess what, on exactly that, handling stress. And so, Joanne, I love this conversation. I can't wait for us to have an awesome dialogue on some of the things that you're seeing when it comes to the science of stress, how everybody sees it, and maybe how do you see it from a medical standpoint?
Thank you, Eunicia. It's always good to have conversations with you and to understand stress. It's such a common word. It's such a part of what we do, and it's part of our lives. And actually, we can't grow without stress. Literally, our bodies, if you think of our bone growth, the bones need stress in order to get strong. So this is something that we need. That's how we learn. That's how we learn new coping skills. That's how we get more resilient. So it's not something that's bad. The problem is that in this day and age, we have stress all over and we almost wear it as a badge of honor. Like I don't like how much stress. It's almost like a battle of who has more stress. And it's really sad because it affects us, right? So we can review three big things. We can review kind of the physiological stressors, kind of like what happens in our bodies. Then what are the psychological stressors? And of course, as a psychiatrist, I love that. It's kind of like what's going in our mind. And then of course, then we'll talk about things that you can start using right now. And if I may, I'm going to get a little sciencey. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Because I think it helps, it might help you understand why do you feel the way you feel. And when there's stress, our brain is built to deal with the stress. And it's almost like this alarm system and it takes over, right? You've probably heard about the fight or flight. We use that phrase a lot. And that is technically a survival mechanism. If there's a fire, you don't want to be checking your phone. You don't want to be messing with your nails. You don't want to be fixing your hair. You want your body to be ready to go. So there's different parts of our brain that gets activated and it sends different signals with different chemicals, different hormones. And there's almost it's like they unplug part of your brain and this part of the brain gets plugged in. And that's important to understand because I hear a lot of, I'm not feeling well in my body, or I'm getting sick, or I can't concentrate. And it could be because your brain is in hyper alert, plugged into this fight or flight. So I like to explain it that way because I sometimes feel like it's a little bit better that way. And you, as the listener, you might be thinking, what is wrong with me that I can't all of a sudden do the things that I normally do or handle stressors the way that I normally do? And it's, if you understand what's going on in your brain and in your system, that by itself can help you, right? Like give yourself a little bit more compassion into what's going on.
So Joanne, you were mentioning, I love the fact that you were talking about this physiological and the psychological stressors in our lives. And when you talked about the flight or fight mechanism, right? The things that show up in our life. And you said something very, very important about being tired. And I personally hear so many individuals talking about, I'm tired. I feel like I may be coming down with something. So they're looking at stress, but they're not realizing that it's stress. They're just simply thinking, I'm tired. And it's because maybe I don't sleep well at night, but they're not really understanding the root cause. So when you're thinking about stress, can you give us, without giving us names, what are the types of examples, like real examples of how you see stress showing up, maybe with that badge of honor in people's lives, and they don't realize that it's actually stress?
Yes, great question. And yes, without giving out names, but this could be you as the listener. So see if how you resonate here. So I was thinking of who comes to mind. It's like one of my clients right now, super successful physician. And when she started working with me, she was dealing with all these problems, no awareness of how that was impacting her. And it was almost like two different people. Like she could tell me this list of problems and then this list of physical symptoms. And then she had a hard time integrating that, because a lot of times what happens is we get so used to this high level of stress that we just think that they're just part of our lives. And then we don't recognize how it's like that slowly making us sicker. And it was exactly what you were saying. She was getting sicker, literally, like she would have whatever was around, like really bad allergies, congestion. She had the flu. She had the COVID like 3 times, tons of upset stomach, really bad digestion. She was gaining weight. She had gained like, I don't know, almost 20 pounds in the span of like about a year and a half. And she wasn't sleeping well, and her brain was just going over and over and over. And right, like she could hear me. I said, like, I wonder if some of this stress, some of these physical symptoms have to do with this level of stress. It's like, yes, but. And as time went on, we did some one-on-one coaching and some group coaching. As she started handling her stressors better through coaching tools, guess what? A lot of her physical symptoms got better. She's actually in better shape now than she was prior to when we started coaching. And I'm not taking credit for all of that, but it was more of being able to balance a lot of that out. And it fills my heart to see her a few years later doing so much better and full awareness. And now whenever she starts not feeling well, she can ask herself those questions. Wait a minute. Am I sick? Like, is there something going on? Did I catch something? Or could the stress be contributing? It doesn't need to be that it's 100%, but at least contributing. And that is true for all of us. We don't always give ourselves permission to ask those difficult questions of, I wonder, how is my day-to-day stress making me sicker or interfering with how I feel, interfering how I'm sleeping? That's one example, definitely.
And I'd love to hear more examples, and maybe we can talk about some of those too. You mentioned this individual was a coaching client, and I love the fact that you started there because, well, for many reasons, but too many individuals oftentimes don't see, they discount coaching. They look at coaching and they say, well, it's a loosey goosey kind of a thing. You can work on things on your own. You can just read a book, listen to a podcast. Yes. If you're listening to this podcast, let me tell you, there's a lot of value to be gleaned from being here. But the kind of value that you get in a one-on-one with Joanne in real life, it pales by comparison. So for our listener, as he or she is listening to the idea of coaching, how would you say you approach the handling of stress with your clients, with your coaching clients, as a coach that may be different than what they might have experienced in the past?
Yes. And, I'll give you a little tangent, because as a psychiatrist, I always have to say, there are times that you do need to see a psychotherapist or you do need to see a psychiatrist. And I'm all for that. That's what I've been doing for 20 some years. So there are times when if it starts interfering with your functioning, if you start feeling super anxious, depressed, those are times that definitely you should check with a professional. So I have all those tools. And what I love about coaching, and I think what makes me unique, is that you don't have to wait until all of this interferes with your functioning. You can start getting help right away. And sometimes help is a bad word for a lot of us successful, but struggle every now and then because it's part of our programming. Like, no, I can do it all myself and I don't need help. So whatever word you need to have here, have someone help you with accountability, help you through the challenge. And I love coaching as you have someone helping you be curious about what's going on in your brain. What are some of those thoughts that you're having? What are some of the emotions? How it's all playing a part. And one of the things that makes me unique is that I have all of those psychology tools that I've used and learned for decades. I bring them into the coaching because sometimes it helps for me to recognize, wait, this is something that's going in your brain, or this is something that's going in your body. And then take it from there and really move forward, right? Like that's the magic of coaching. It's not just a hand holding, is we're better. What's next? And that's, we've all experienced that and have someone to help us move forward that way.
And, you said something about the integration of the psychiatry tools that you have, but of course you don't act as a psychiatrist when you deal with your coaching clients. Can you maybe give our listener an example of a situation where maybe you worked with a fellow physician that was dealing with stress, as an example, since we're talking about stress, and they were able to recognize the difference between Joanne speaking as a psychiatrist, but he or she is able to use all these tools that from a coaching standpoint are making a world of difference?
Yes, thank you. So I think of another example, and this is another doctor. And again, also very successful. He's in leadership, in administration. A lot of shifts happened. And all of a sudden, a lot of new responsibilities. And with the new responsibilities came a lot of stress. But it was good for a while because he was able to do all these good things and change some policies. And there were a lot of good things. So it's sometimes the good things also confuse the effect of the stress. And he started having memory problems and difficulties making decisions and difficulties with concentration and also a little bit of sleep problem. And he was very concerned. And he actually came to me more as a colleague and reviewed some of the symptoms with me. And he was like, I don't know, could I be having adult ADHD, right? Like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or am I having early dementia? Poor thing. He was genuinely concerned that, and a lot of times when you're smart, you can have ADHD and you probably just figure it out. And then sometimes it's not just until things get really hard that the symptoms get in the way. So it's not uncommon for a smart professional to show up later in life. So that does happen. And it does happen that sleep deprivation, chronic stress, all those things that we put our bodies through can put us at risk of a memory problem that's more in the brain's case or, different types of dementia. And I could feel his pain and his fear. And he asked me, do I need to see a psychiatrist or what else could be going on? And I said, well, let me ask you some questions. So we were able to do some coaching. I said, I can help you with coaching. And then if you need more of a psychiatric or neurological evaluation, we can talk about that later. But let's see if we get your stress under control, if some of these symptoms get better. And that's actually a very hopeful thing to hear. And effectively, we were able again and for him, it was more of getting very clear on what was important, going through his values, going through his priorities, organizing, more time efficiency. And then things started getting into place, because a lot of times we get stuck in, I don't have time. I cannot do that in this time of my life. You don't understand. I have so many responsibilities. It's only me. I am the only one who can do this. And it could be true and maybe not 100% true. So it's not always about just be calm, go meditate and, just delegate it all. A lot of times we can't. And we understand that as coaches of other professional people, you deal with these clients as well. So you know what I'm talking about. But all those tools helped him within weeks. It was very powerful. And then he because he opened up the space, the energy and the time, then we were able to get into more traditional coaching of getting curious with your thoughts and your emotions. And he got even better. But it was beautiful. I'm glad I can share those examples, because a lot of you might be listening and thinking, I'm too young to have dementia, or I don't know, I've never had attention problems. Why am I having that attention problem right now? Or why am I making mistakes or having difficulties or mood changes? Sometimes we start getting cranky more than we need to. And it could all be the effect of the stress. And definitely, thank you for saying that, Onicia. It can all be better through this very specific kind of coaching. Very hopeful for our listeners.
100%. So if you're the point here, let me underline some concept. If you feel like if you're listening and you feel like your concentration is going down, you've got sleep problems, maybe you put on some extra weight and you're having a hard time getting it down. It may not be just because you're over 40, by the way. That's Eunicia's perspective. It could be different. If you're debating yourself, Joanne, you talked about if you're thinking about, do I have dementia? Is something starting to settle in earlier? Here's what I heard and here's what I know. It might be that you just need to talk to someone. And I'll share with you at the end of our episode how exactly you can do that to seek what might that look like for you. But before we get there, Joanne, I do have another question for you. Oftentimes individuals are either very prone to wanting to see a physician. In this case, we're talking about psychiatry. So as somebody in the psychiatric profession, versus saying, I need someone to talk to. I need someone that can help me understand what I'm battling with from a different angle. Could you provide our listeners maybe some parallels of specific situations that would be more suited for coaching? And your example earlier was a beautiful example. But maybe if you can just use some additional examples of where would someone be a better suited for to start on the coaching path, and then figuring out, do I need to go and seek psychiatric help versus just saying, I need a psychologist, I need a psychiatrist right now, when the reality is it may not be that. It may be external causes that we can learn to deal with in a different manner.
Yes, I love this question. I get this question a lot because they say, Joanne, you do it all. How do we know? And there's a little bit of overlap. So it's worth talking about it. And my biased answer to start with is we all benefit from coaching. What I say is, if you're doing well, you can be doing better. That's my opinion. And we all go through stressors, and it's very helpful to have someone who can lead you, who can guide you, and who can just help you see things that you might not be able to see, and give you a different angle. And as we talk in this podcast, you are someone who is successful. You have things figured out. You are doing well financially. You have, right, like I say, all the box checked, and you might not understand why you're struggling. Because sometimes it's almost easier. This sounds a little bad, but it's sometimes easier to say, this X thing happened. That explains why I'm struggling, which is different than when we're doing well. but things start getting out of balance. We start losing our sense of self and we start to struggle. And if any of those things happen, coaching can be so helpful. There's different kinds of coaching, and a skilled coach will know, okay, you just need this high performance kind of coaching. You're doing really well. Let's elevate you. Let's take you to that next level. Let's give you the challenge. If you have someone who deals more with the mindset, that mental and emotional well-being can help you navigate those waves and then give you challenges, but that you can handle, because we don't want to add more to your plate. And then even if there's some bigger ups and downs, they can still help you through that, give you tools to help you feel better so that then you can get out of that fight or flight. Because when you are in fight or flight all the time, you could have hired all the coaches, all the therapists, read all the books, and they're not going to help, because you need to recognize when you're in that fight or flight, calm your central nervous system down, have tools for that, and then use your other tools. That's why sometimes we get frustrated. Like, I'm doing all the things. Why am I not feeling better? And a coach, it's like an outside person who knows you and can reflect back on you, can help you see patterns of behaviors, patterns of thinking, and can help you build tools specific and individualized for you to move through the challenges and still thrive. That's a summary in my romantic self.
That's a beautiful summary.
Because of course it's in my heart. I've done it for decades. This is different than when you're worrying excessively, when the physical symptoms get really bad, when your day-to-day functioning is not there, when you stop enjoying the things that you normally enjoy, when you're in that very negative thinking loop and none of these tools work, that's definitely a time to seek help and either see your primary care doctor, call a therapist, call a psychiatrist. Sometimes the therapy is enough. Sometimes medications do help. Again, that's what I've been doing for decades. Now, I'll give you a little caveat that some people do both. And like you said, thank you for mentioning that. I am really good with my boundaries when I'm coaching. I have my psychiatry knowledge, but I'm not a psychiatrist. And when I'm seeing my patients, I can use some coaching tools so I can mix it up. And one of the things that I think I do very well is that I have clients, and I'll sometimes say, I'm going to put my psychiatry hat on to give you information. And then I say, this is something good for you to take to your doctor, or this might be a good time to see a psychiatrist. So some of the clients do see me as a coach and actually see someone else as a therapist or another person as a psychiatrist. And so that can happen as well. That's a long answer to your question. Thank you. An important one, though.
It's a beautiful answer to that question. And here's what I'd like, as you're listening to this, if you're thinking, what in the world and what do I do now? Here's what I'll tell you that I know about coaches. Not all coaches, just like not all doctors, and just like you probably know, I will say it, not all financial professionals are the same. They're not all playing in the field of excellence. Many of them just are. And when it comes to coaching, here's what I know. When you're looking and you have those questions and maybe you're feeling those things that Joanne was mentioning earlier, you have to look for a coach that doesn't just say I'm a coach and maybe has just a certification. I would encourage you, very much encourage you, to look for someone that understands and recognizes patterns of behavior. And Joanne, you did a beautiful job talking about that. Look for a coach that has tools. You also talked about that. We, in our world, especially with my company, we talk a lot about methodologies. Those tools are critical. And more importantly, they have access to resources. Resources in the specific situation we're talking about, stress, they have access to resources that go beyond their field or their area of expertise when it comes to coaching, but can direct you potentially to a psychiatrist, potentially to a physician, potentially to another coach. And so the reality is that when you're thinking about coaching, if you fall in the category where you're thinking about, well, gee, all coaches are the same, and I know that everybody's a coach and most people aren't successful and yada, 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 whatever the story runs through your head, you're not looking for the coach that comes and says, I coach because I've been there, done that, and life has taught me a lesson and I got this, right? I'm just going to replicate it and duplicate it and teach others. You're looking for the individual that has those three categories that I just mentioned. And the reason I don't want to dovetail into Joanne, your area of expertise, but I've seen it with other individuals. And unfortunately, I hear the bashing that happens with the coaching industry, because way too many individuals, they had one life experience and all of a sudden they became coaches overnight. And unfortunately, those are probably not individuals that are most suited to help you if you're listening to this podcast, because we know you're successful. We know you're at a different level and you need a different level of support, the next level of support. Joanne, this has been a very much enlightening a discussion for us, because for me, it kind of brought back so many of the things that we know about both industries, frankly. Are there any specific takeaways that you would want to leave our listener with when it comes to specifically the topic of today's conversation, dealing with stress?
Yes. And I love our conversations because we can go on and on about all these topics that we're both very passionate about, and we want to impart and help others. And I want to say we can't forget about the basics. A lot of times, even simple things can make such a big difference. Simple things that we pay attention to, we do what we prioritize, and the consistency can make a big difference. So I'll just repeat a few things that you can do right now. And you might say, that sounds so cheesy. Yes. And important. So I cannot be here without saying, even though I just said all the things about fight or flight, when we practice any kind of mindfulness technique, we are telling our nervous system, it's almost like we put a blanket in our central nervous system, like it's all okay. And something as simple as a deep breath where we extend our exhale for a few repetitions can be really good to get out of that fight or flight and connect to our more functional part of our brain. And of course, we can talk about meditation and journaling and all those things, but let's not forget about the simple things, because that's what I hear first. I don't have time for that. Well, do you breathe throughout the day? Can you take deeper breaths while you're walking down the hallway? Literally, these are the conversations I have with the doctors I coach, because you are busy. We don't want to minimize that. Then other things, obviously, let's sleep better, let's eat better, let's move our bodies, whatever that is for you. And then, like we've been talking here, don't forget about support. A lot of times when we're struggling in this high level of stress, we isolate because we think that everyone else has it figured out but ourselves. And just you listening to this podcast today lets me know there's a little part of you wishes to move forward and feel a little bit better. So share it with someone, talk about it, because this is significant. And of course, like we mentioned, coaching and therapy and all those things can be very, very, very beneficial. So I just wanted to make sure that we wrap it up with a beautiful bow, because a lot of times it feels kind of hopeless, and it's not. So let's move forward. We're all here to get better, to help each other out. I'm very grateful that we can be here in this conversation.
I am very grateful myself. And here's what I'll tell you. As you're listening to this, I obviously, Joanne, you and I are not just good together, but we enjoy our conversations. But for our listener, as you're here, my question to you is, are you interested? Do you want to learn what is that one or maybe two things that could make your life better? Are you looking to figure out what are the basics for you? Because here's what I know. Your basics are very different than mine. They're very different than Joanne's. They're very different than anybody else's. If you want to know what are those basics for you so that you can have a better life, a more meaningful life, and frankly, an easier life, do yourself a favor and go to successfulbutstruggling.com. You'll see Joanne's picture there. You can click on it. You can click somewhere on the website to schedule a call and just get your questions answered. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find what your basics are and life will be a lot more enjoyable. So without further ado, Joanne, it was a pleasure us having this conversation here today. To you as you're listening, we look forward to seeing you next time. And don't forget to go to the website, successfulbutstruggling.com.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.